I never understood why my mother had one rule. Never follow your little brothers at night, she said, every single time. I didn't listen. I never did. It started with a knock at my window. A small, thin boy, eyes wide, darting like he had already seen things I couldn't imagine. My mother's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Go help him. You'll be his big brother tonight. I let him inside. That night, I learned two things. 1, my little brothers never stay. 2, what waits in the dark below the basement is hungry. The house was quiet, too quiet, when I first entered it alone. The hum of the old refrigerator, the soft creak of the pipes, this had always been the soundtrack of my childhood. But now it felt like a warning. My mother had been sick for years. The constant cough, the oxygen tank hissing, the way her hands shook as she poured coffee. I thought her world was shrinking because of illness, but now I could see the cracks in her stories. The first little brother appeared when I was 7. She led him to me like it was normal, as if he had always belonged. Scruffy hair, worn jeans, wary eyes, the same look every boy had. She whispered, "This one's had it rough. He needs you." And then she left, disappearing into her haze of smoke and cough. I tried to play the role of big brother, for a week, maybe more. We shared video games, comic books, and bagged chips. I taught him secret moves and cheat codes, just like I imagined I would if I were the hero. Then he vanished. The bunk bed empty, the backpack gone, neatly folded sheets. I panicked. I ran to the kitchen. My mother, staring out the window, cigarette smoke curling around her, didn't look surprised. "Where is he?" I asked. "Your father came for him in the night," she said, her voice soft. "He has work to do, important work. Don't worry, he's safe." At 7, I believed her. My father had always been a ghost in our house, a name scratched into the story of my life. It made a strange kind of sense that he would be rescuing lost boys. Over the years, there were many little brothers, each one different yet the same. The comic drawer, the genius who fixed the toaster, the quiet shadow that followed me everywhere. They stayed a week, sometimes longer, and then they vanished. By the time I was 16, I knew the truth. My father wasn't coming back. There was no secret workshop, no halfway house for runaways, but I never questioned my mother too much. Her fragile body and trembling hands were always a wall between me and the questions I didn't want to ask. The last little brother came when I was 16. Mom's cough was worse. Her hands shook as she passed him to me. This one was different, street smart, defiant, curious. He asked questions I didn't have answers for. "What's in the basement?" he asked one night, pointing at the locked door. I froze. "Junk, old supplies, Grandpa's hobby stuff. Nothing dangerous, really." He didn't believe me. A faint, sweet rot seemed to seep up from under the door, a smell I'd grown used to but never named. He left 2 days later, and there were no more. "You can't let him go hungry," she rasped. "Promise me, you won't let him starve." "Who, Mom? There's no one here." "Him," she hissed, eyes darting to the basement. "He's been patient. He gets so hungry." The hospice nurse explained it away as dementia or paranoia, but it felt like truth, something my mother had carried for decades, finally surfacing. I needed proof. I searched the house for the real past, old photo albums, yellowed newspaper clippings about missing children, a shoebox of brittle articles spanning 10 years, stories of kids who disappeared, lining up with the little brothers I remembered, scruffy, wary, lost. I brought one clipping to my mother's bedside. She focused, a tear tracing her cheek. She fumbled in her drawer and pushed a VHS tape into my hand. "Watch this. After, not before. Then you'll know." Those were her last words. She slipped into a coma that night and passed away 2 days later. The VHS sat on the counter for weeks, silent and accusing. Last night, I could no longer wait. I dug out the dusty VCR, hooked it up, and inserted the tape. The first images were innocent. A backyard barbecue, my toddler self chasing a ball, my mother young and laughing. But then my father appeared, normal at first, then twitching, scratching his back. A dark, pulsating growth emerged on his shoulder blade, branching into veins across his torso. His face, twisted in pain, was still recognizable. My mother's panicked voice whispered to a doctor, "It's not cancer. It's not cellular. It grows." The scene shifted to a candlelit room, my parents consulting an old woman with dried, wrinkled skin. "It is a seed, a passenger. It fell from a cold star. It eats. It grows. It will consume everything. To stop it, you must feed it, small offerings, or it will feed on many." The video cut, her voice overlaid. "He wouldn't do it. He let it consume him. I fed it. I locked it in the basement, and now it is yours." I held the key, the cold brass burning in my palm. The basement was waiting. The hunger was patient, relentless, waiting for me to choose. The key felt heavier than it should have. My hand shook as I turned it in the lock. The basement door groaned, metal scraping against metal like a dying animal. One step down, and the smell hit me, sweet, rotten, a mix of earth and decay that coated my tongue. The bulb flickered, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Old furniture loomed like sleeping giants under dusty sheets, cardboard boxes stacked in crooked towers. But I barely noticed them. My eyes were locked on the door at the far end of the basement. It had been decades since I last saw it, yet I remembered everything. Dark, warped wood, black mold creeping along the frame, long scratches gouged into the surface, starting about waist-high from the inside. Whoever or whatever had been inside was strong, patient, hungry. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. It wasn't a room anymore, not a room in any sense that I knew. The walls, floor, ceiling, they were gone, replaced by a pulsating mass of living flesh, dark and bruised, glistening with wet light. Veins writhed across every surface like some impossible organic labyrinth. The sweet, rotten smell intensified until I could barely breathe. Suspended from the ceiling by thick cord-like umbilicals was a shape, humanoid yet wrong. Arms, legs, and torso fused into a tumorous mass, writhing slowly in the dim light. A face looked down at me, features grotesquely swollen, distorted, but unmistakably my father's. And yet it wasn't just him, it was more. A hunger, ancient and unending, radiated from it, filling the basement and clawing at my mind. I froze. My breath hitched. The VHS replayed in my head, the old woman's words. "It needs life, not the life it is attached to, but new life. Small offerings. You feed the one, or it will feed on many." I closed my eyes. Memories flashed. Faces of every little brother who had come through that house. The comic drawer, the boy who fixed the toaster, the quiet shadow. Their faces, hopeful in life and terrified in death. They had been food, sacrifices to something I never questioned because my mother's rule was always, never follow them at night. I opened my eyes, one step forward, then another. The tendril from the wall nearest me stopped inches from my chest, quivering like a predator testing its prey. The flesh around it pulsed rhythmically, a heartbeat massive enough to shake the floor. I saw movement deeper inside the mass. Shadows shifted. A smaller figure, a boy-shaped silhouette reached for me. My stomach twisted. That look, the scruffy hair, the wary hunger was unmistakable. Another little brother, or perhaps the last, or a fragment of all them. "Feed him," my mother's voice whispered in my mind. I had no choice. I opened the box at the corner of the room, the one she had left filled with old photographs, clippings, and personal items from every boy who had ever stayed. Each small token felt like a life, and in a way, it was. I placed them carefully into the mass, pressing them into the pulsing flesh. It reacted immediately. The tendrils recoiled, the mass shrank slightly, the sweet, rotten scent dulling for the first time in decades. A groaning, wet sound filled the room. Not a scream, not a growl, but a satisfaction. It was fed, dormant, for now. I backed away, hand trembling on the key that still hung around my neck. I had inherited a legacy I could never have imagined, a prison, a hunger, a duty. My mother's rule was never about obedience. It was survival. Days passed. The house felt heavier, older, almost alive. I avoided the basement, but the smell remained, faint and clinging, like a warning. I stopped sleeping at night. Every creak of the floorboards, every bump in the walls, made me imagine tendrils stretching, reaching for me. Then I began to see them. At first, shadows of children at the edge of my vision, a scruffy figure watching from the street, another standing in the backyard at dusk, disappearing when I blinked. They were drawn here, hungry, waiting for me to fail. I realized what my mother had been protecting me from all those years, not the boys themselves, not the fleeting joy of having a sibling, even temporarily. It was the basement, the thing below that devoured them. And now it was my responsibility. I couldn't let it consume the next. I had to feed it, carefully, deliberately. I had to maintain the balance, or everything in this town would be devoured. I learned to feed it small things at first, tokens of life. Photographs, trinkets, even drawings. Every little brother had left something behind. I pressed them into the pulsating mass, and each time it paused, satisfied, dormant, waiting. But patience wore thin. Hunger was endless. One night, I saw it stretch toward the front door, a single tendril, impossibly long, curling around a banister like a snake. My heart hammered. I realized it had been patient, yes, but it was learning, growing smarter, bolder. I ran to the street, finding a boy wandering, alone, lost. His scruffy hair and wary eyes mirrored the first little brother I had ever met. I remembered my mother's warning. Never follow your little brothers at night. I turned him away. I didn't take him inside. I couldn't. My duty was clear now. Feed the one, or it would feed on many. I would not risk another. But the hunger was patient, clever. It waited, and it would not forget. Each night, I check the basement door. One day, I will have to go down again. I will have to feed it. The VHS tape still sits on the counter, a reminder of the price of knowing the truth. And I know now why my mother had that rule. It wasn't about fear. It wasn't about protection from me. It was about protection from it. The thing in the basement, hungry beyond comprehension, patient beyond measure, waiting for the next. I live in silence now. I work the factory, I walk the empty streets, and I watch. Every child who seems lost or scruffy draws my attention, my judgment. One wrong move, one act of curiosity, and the basement will wake. The rule is simple. Never follow your little brothers at night. I follow it. I have no choice, because if I break it, if I fail, the hunger will be free and nothing will stop it. I am the keeper, the warden, the one who feeds it, the last line of defense. And every night, when the house groans and the pipes hiss, I hear it waiting, patient, hungry, and I remember my mother's voice whispering through the smoke. Never follow your little brothers at night. I obey, because disobedience is death.